Welcome, everyone, to Asian Pacific Voices Radio, where you'll find stimulating conversations that explore diverse topics and stories that impact our communities. Hello, I'm your host, Sasha Fu. Our guest today is someone I have really enjoyed getting to learn and know about. His name is Nip Kee Lam. He is an activist and an advocate for those who have been incarcerated. He is himself someone who knows what life is like behind bars and what it's like to re-enter the world outside prison walls. His group, Asian Prison Support Committee, that's APSC, offers support, help, and hope to Asians in the corrections system, with programs aimed at boosting self-awareness, cultural pride, and giving assistance with jobs, housing, and legal representation. Key, as he wants us to call him, plays a central role in running the APSC Asian Prison Support Committee offices that are headquartered in Oakland. Welcome today, Key. Thanks for joining us on Asian Pacific Voices.
Thank you, Sasha, for having me on.
Sure. Well, you've got a fascinating story to tell. So to make things simple, let's start at the beginning. You were born in Vietnam, came here to the United States with your family. You were just 4 years old, and you came to California, as I recall. What was life like for your family in those early years, and how did that lead you to the wrong side of the criminal justice system?
So we came here when I was 4 years old. We actually got our visas from Hong Kong refugee camp to come over. I remember on the paperwork, we came to through San Francisco, but we migrated all over the Bay Area. And the reason why we moved around so much because my parents, it was a new culture for them, it was a new language for them, and so they didn't have no history, no education history, none of the stuff that basic citizens has. And so they did all manual labor work just to make ends meet, just to put food on the table and also pay the rent and put clothing on our back. And it wasn't my parents was arranged marriage in Vietnam, but we fled Vietnam because of the fall of Vietnam, and so they wanted everyone out of there that wasn't in their belief of communism at that time. And so ethnically we're Chinese, and so because we wasn't pure Vietnamese, they wanted us out there, and so we had to flee. It's not we had to give up everything we had. So we had a lot of property, we had a lot of we was really well off in Vietnam, but then we was forced out of there. Along the journey, just to talk about that real quick, my parents, my mom and her parents got separated during the flight. The flight. My mom's parents got murdered by pirates in South China Sea, and we were stranded in South China Sea for 6 months. Barely was able to survive 6 months in the South China Sea, and that was a struggle.
Incredible. Yeah,
and we was rescued by fishermen and brought to Hong Kong refugee camp. And from there, 2 years after the Hong Kong refugee camp, we got visas to come to America. So after growing up in the Bay Area, because that's what I knew, I always asked my parents, like, why we keep moving. And the typical answer I always got, like, mind your business. Don't worry about it. Right. And it's been like that most of my life. 2 years after being in America, my parents separated. And they separated because of many factors. One was domestic violence that in the Asian culture, we never talk about. It's shameful to talk about there's domestic violence in the household. We also don't talk about, mental health is another part that we don't talk about. Like dealing with trauma, like, having a loved one get murdered or lost, and then just going through the whole process of fleeing, escaping, death, persecution, in education camp. Like no one talks about none of this trauma.
So by the time you got to the United States, your family had been through so much trauma, so much suffering. You were just a little kid. How did that affect you?
I isolated myself. I isolated myself first from my feelings because I was told not to talk, not to ask answers. So I remained so they taught me to be very quiet. And one of the things that I did a lot as a kid, I isolated myself in my room. Like I did everything in my room. I ate him like when there was food. I would take my food and go in my room and just eat by myself. Everything I did as a kid was by myself.
Hmm. What was school like for you, and how did you eventually find yourself, I guess, hanging out with this element that was engaged in crime, basically?
So a lot of Southeast Asian that comes to America, we lost everything that we had. So when we came to this country, we went into like the low income housing, the low income poverty, and in those areas, there's like nothing. There's no resources. There's nothing. And so like I remember as a young kid, my mom took me out of school after my dad left and made me translate everything for her at the social welfare office. Everywhere we went, I had to be her translator. That was very hard. We end up leaving San Francisco when I was 15 years old. I had developed a family in San Francisco in that rough neighborhood through violence because violence was the acceptance in that neighborhood. If you wasn't using violence as a means to fit in or solve your problem, violence would be used against me, and that's why I normalized violence as young as 8 years old. Uh, I was bullied often a lot because of what I ate, how I look, how I talk, how I dress. Because we was very poor, so I got all hand me downs from that we bought from Goodwill or friends and family members that gave us stuff. And so I wasn't like the best dressed kid at school, and could be really cruel.
Yeah.
I remember as young as when I was in the second grade, I got stabbed by another kid because over a kickball game because he got mad, I got mad, we push each other and he ended up stabbing me with a pencil. And I still have that mark on my arm to today since second grade. Um, and so like I got bullied a lot. And then so when we moved to Richmond, I grew up mostly around Black and Polynesians. And so when I didn't really know much Asians growing up. So when I finally moved to Richmond, California, there was a big diversity of Asians. I like, wow, there's just a lot of Asians. But not only was there Asian, but I got introduced to the gang lifestyle.
Did you
I
feel
didn't
like
know
you
what
had more of an identity around that? The
I
Asian
did.
gang
Well,
lifestyle?
learning their like some of their story, we all struggle with the same thing, right? Being like 1.5 gen, second generation, like we like learning how to navigate this new culture,
Sure.
right? But also like dealing with other people of colors that was also struggling because there was a wedge put against us that they was they was told that we was taking all their jobs, all their resources,
Mhm.
which wasn't true. We all was suffering
Yeah.
and had no resources, lacking resources.
Right.
But that was the policy that was put on them, and that's their belief that they was told. They was fed that lie that we was taking all the resources, and so we got targeted by other people of color in the community because that's what they thought. And so instead of being victims, we joined. So all this young Asians, especially the boys, all came together and made a gang. And in the out of desperation to protect ourselves, out of survival mode.
Okay. And that leads us to the point where at 17 years old, you were involved in a gang related murder, homicide.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit more
yeah.
about that? Because that was a pivotal event that led you
Mhm.
being convicted and going to prison.
It was many years of trauma that led up to me joining a gang, to the point where at 17 years old, I basically gave up my life. I quit caring about my family. I quit caring about school. I quit caring about my future. I had opportunities to play sport, to excel in sports in college because I had scouts come out to watch me play football and baseball and track and field. But but the trauma, I just couldn't let go of the pain. I couldn't let go of the blame. I played the blaming game a lot against my family for living in a city that had nothing, no resources, and also not only that, I blamed them for being bullied all my life, and I just quit caring. I quit caring about everything. Where I came to the point where the gang became my family. So
Yes.
whatever they wanted me to do, I was the first one to line up to do it, to raise my hand. It was on September 30th, 1993, where friend of mine's, one of my gang friends called me up and said, hey, there's some rival gangs close to our school. Let's go fight them. And without hesitation, I said, let's go. Uh, we didn't end up getting in a fight. We ended up getting in a verbal argument where the police came and so we fled. Everyone fled. Everybody separated. But I kept getting a page from my mom to come home. I haven't been home for like a couple of days because there's so much dysfunctionality in our household. Everybody think Asian families got it all together. My minority myth that we all got it good. That is far from the truth. And so on the way home, I saw one of the rival gangs, and because I could tell by this, in a gang lifestyle, you could tell somebody if they're in a gang or not because they flash their colors. The Asian gang I was with was all Crips, and we all wear blue, and so the rival gang was wearing red, and so we got in an argument. They ran, and I chased them, and I ended up stabbing one of them to death. And like a coward, I ran away. I didn't stay there, to take responsibility. I ran away. I was scared. I didn't. Part of me went straight into denial mode, like this did not happen. I did not do this. I did not. I remember I went back to my homeboy's house, and I told him, I said, "Man, I think I just killed somebody," and we was all kids, all under the age, 18 and under, and so nobody said nothing. We just all stood there in silence.
Do you remember though what was going through your head when you realized, I think I just killed somebody?
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't imagine myself doing something as heinous as this in my life. I got into many fights growing up as a kid. That's all we did was fight, but never really to the point where like somebody could have lost their life. Well, many chances people could have lost. I could knock somebody down. They could hit their head on the ground and died. But I wasn't thinking like that as a kid. I was just thinking like, all right, we're gonna fight either them. So the mentality is either them or us. So either you or me. And one thing I was taught growing up was like, it's about you. It's not about the other person. Screw the other person. Forget what they're going through, right? It's no time to do that. Just focus on you and what you got to just focus on your business. And so that's what I did. I just focused on the person, and I harmed the other person. But I didn't take into account how that harm was going to affect the whole community.
And I don't think you were understanding at that time really how the consequences would affect you personally, because that sometime later that year you were convicted as a juvenile, but tried as you were tried as an adult and sent to prison at 17 years old, entering the correction system in California. I have to imagine you were, scared beyond belief. Do you remember what were your impressions when you went in to prison at such a young age? What were you thinking? What were your impressions?
It was straight. I was in a state of survival mode, fear, numbness, denial was definitely one. I just put up this wall, like this is not real, like this is a fantasy. And even though like there was a separation within myself, mind, body, spirit, like everything was separated, and all it was is just focus on what you need to do to survive. I was scared out of my mind. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. I watched all I seen and I heard about what happens in prison, about being like a young person could get raped or end up getting harmed, and so like I was always ready. And so to my surprise, there was a lot of when came in, there was a lot of other Asians, young Asian like myself. It was after the Clinton era where the Super Predator was put out there, and part of that Super Predator was the belief of the minority as well. Like, we're because I'm Asian, so that my minority actually went against me when I went into the criminal justice system. When I was going through my trial, they're like, well, you're smart, you should know better, right? You have more insight than other people of colors. Like, why didn't you just walk away? But they didn't take, even after knowing my whole story, that didn't matter because they went into the belief that that my minority myth. And so going through prison at 17 years old, even before I went to prison, I I went through the whole system on this one case. I went through juvenile hall, youth authority, county jail, and then prison. But there's another part, another element to that was immigration, which we probably could talk about in a few seconds. But I remember in county jail, but no one ever talked about like somebody tried to rape me in county jail, you know, and I damn near ripped his whole head off because I was just trying to survive, and so I did everything I could to almost kill that guy. Where he, and by me going back to normalized violence, I was able to survive county jail as a kid, and I was 18 at the time.
Let me ask you a little bit about your experiences inside prison. What was prison life like for you? I know that there are a lot of stories about how Black inmates and brown inmates
Mhm.
segregate. They watch out for each other. How
Mhm.
large is the population of Asian prisoners, and do you all kind of hang together? How does that work in terms of your relations or interactions with other groups inside that prison?
So when I came to a prison system, they asked me what my so they say there's only four nationalities in prison. There's either you're white, you're black, you're Mexican, or if you're not one of those, you're other. So anyone that was Asian or Polynesian fell into the other
Other.
category. The other. So that's the perpetuation of invisibility of the Southeast Asian as well as the Polynesian community. Like all Asian, no matter if you're Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Laos, we all fall under the category as a other.
So if I asked how
And
many,
so,
yeah, there's if I asked how many
so
prisoners of Vietnamese ancestry, you would not be able to answer. The prison system would not answer because we're all other.
no,
We're other people.
correct. That's correct. Even your Polynesian, you there won't. I couldn't tell you the answer, the number to that either because they fell under other. So like we get clumped into this group. So like even somebody that was from Brazil would consider as a other,
Hmm.
and it's so it's like really so you can't get so when there's no data, no statistics, you can't get no resources to that community. And so like that's why like when we got into prison, the only way we hung out with each other, Asian Pacific Islander, because they we identify each other right away. Like we ask each other, are you Vietnamese? Are you Samoan? Are you Tongan? Are you Laos? And like if you are one of those things, you're part of our car. That's what we call it in prison. You're a part of our car. And it wasn't a big car at all compared to the black, the white, and the Mexicans. Like we was really small. But the one thing that separated us from them is that even though we were small, we will show you we are not afraid no matter what. We'll do whatever it takes. We had to be more violent than the other groups because if we weren't as more violent as the other group, we would be the victims. But the other thing that was helpful for us, like we play a really tough role in politics. So like if there's two Asian or two Polynesians that will rival gang members on the street, they no matter what their affiliation was on the street, once they come to prison, that affiliation is left outside of prison because our number is so small. Like we have to support each other. Versus like the black gangs, they segregate with among each other
I
between
see.
Bloods, Crips.
The key you said that of the white, black, Latino, and Asian groups, the Asians were the most violent. Did that also result in your folks getting the most punishment, the most penalties?
Yeah. So when there's an issue, so one of the politics that we do, if you owe a drug debt, you take care of that drug debt, right? And like if you don't pay that drug debt to another race, we will take care of you. Like one of our own people will take care of that person, and we will also pay out the drug debt. Whereas other groups, like a black or white or Mexican, like their politic is not as well. Some people will, hate
So
me for this. They will say like, no, our policy is more stricter than yours, right? But in my eyes, just as my own opinion, like we play a major hard politics and run a hard line within
So you're
ourselves.
still
Like
you're self-policing. You're policing yourselves. You're policing
very
the
much
members
so.
of your own group. Okay.
Of course, very most definitely.
I want to talk about, you've mentioned it already, about this idea of deportation. For a lot of prisoners who get out of the correction system, they go back to their home communities. I'm talking about white, Black, Latinos.
Mhm.
But for some
Some,
Asian
yeah.
folks, it's very different because they may have served their sentence. And by the way, you had a stiff sentence. You had a 25 years to life sentence. You
Yeah.
get
Mhm.
out, or other people like yourself get out, but they don't go back to their home community. They go right into the hands of immigration and they are set up for deportation. Why does that happen? Explain.
So a lot of time, like myself, our family, when we came to America, our family always focus on what you had to do to survive, but we never talk about the past, right?
Yeah.
Like when I got arrested, my family didn't tell me that we were refugees. And so I grew up with the notion that I was an American. This is my home. This is where I'm from. Because I don't remember being born in Vietnam. I don't remember the the journey, to Hong Kong refugee and coming to America. I remember none of that. All I remember is America. And so I never even thought about that I was deportable. Like I didn't even know what immigration was at the time. So a lot of young folks that came to America, you know, they thought, they had the same issues that I had, where our parents did not become American citizens. But if they did become American citizens, we wouldn't have faced deportation. But so instead of going, paroling from prison to our community, we was handed over to immigration custody because of our felony conviction. When we committed a felony, our status, no matter what, is legal permanent resident, is automatically stripped from us. So anybody that's Southeast Asian that was not a citizen when they got convicted of a felony, especially an aggravated felony, is put up for automatic deportation. So their the legal status is automatically stripped from them. And so like even though they're, like myself that was, eligible for parole, instead of getting parole straight out, we was handed over to immigration custody facing deportation.
So what happened in your case? You were slated to be deported,
So
but
because I can't so I was sent over to immigration to face deportation because there's a MOU written between that was established between the US and Vietnam about 1995. Anyone that came before that year
yeah.
was deemed non-deportable by Vietnam, because Vietnam, like, we don't want those people back. They're considered refugees. They're considered traitors
Okay.
to our
So
country.
the memo of
So like we don't want them
understanding,
back
there was
because we don't want.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
you were,
But even so now, because of that MOU, I was released.
okay. But other people do get caught up in this net and end up going to a country where they have
Yeah.
no family. They can't speak the language because they grew up here.
Mhm.
What happens to those people?
Yeah.
They are
So Cambodia, Philippines, China, South Korea, like Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, like there a lot of them get deported, like you said, and they struggle over there because people, once they know that they have a criminal record, they don't want to hire them. They're like, "You're a felon, you're a criminal. We don't want to hire you. We can't trust you." So that stigma and that labeling get placed on them automatically. Like right now, like there is so many people that got deported are just struggling to make. If they have no family, they either become homeless, they revert back to criminal behaviors, or they get caught up, in using drugs and alcohol again, just to deal with whatever the struggle they got.
yeah, that is a tragedy. Which brings us to the work of the Asian Prisoner Support Committee. Some of the work that your committee is doing is to help those folks who are under threat of being deported. Tell us about the other programs that you have
Mhm.
launched in the last, is it what, 5 or 6, maybe more, 10 years?
Yeah. So yeah, we've been around for surprisingly, we've been around for 20 years. Some only like locally people know us, but it's only been recent that we've been doing a lot of national work, like the Vision Act, trying to stop uh, deportation of our folks getting handed over from prison straight to immigration. So like we've been trying to stop that. The other things that we've been doing a lot is that we've been doing national campaigns to keep people who are facing immediate deportation home, and even people that got deported, like fighting for the ability to come back, which we don't get many wins, but we was able to bring 2 people back from Cambodia
Wow.
to have their case reduced from a felony to misdemeanor. So like we don't like yeah. So there's thousands that got deported, but it's very few that come back. And so our goal and our mission is to keep families together, and to because keeping family together is actually building a healthy community.
And also, you do a lot of work in the reentry area, helping prisoners who are coming out.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, think about it. I mean, like yourself, you were gone for what, 23 years?
Yes.
And when you
Yeah.
came out,
So I went in as a kid, came out as an adult.
yeah,
Yeah, and there was no one to help me navigate the process because I don't have a birth certificate. I don't have any history of being an adult in America. So like I was a juvenile coming out as an adult and learning how to navigate that, and no one, it was a struggle for me. I'm like, what? But I was very fortunate because I have family, I have friends,
mhm,
and I have all the support. Whereas others who are coming home don't have all that. They lost all that. Some of the folks that's getting out of immigration or getting out of prison, their parents passed away while they was incarcerated. So what do they do then when they have no documentation? And so one of my passions is to help them, using my own lived experience to help them get their ID. Because without ID, you can't open up a bank
right.
account, you can't get a driver's license, you can't do
A
nothing.
lot of the things that people take for granted are not accessible to somebody who's been in prison for a long time,
Yeah.
especially if they're not documented
Yes.
as a citizen. That's something to think about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where,
And
where do you
it is.
where do you think the committee is making the most difference?
Wow, there's 3 facets that we're making. Reentry is definitely one of them. Our other one is our anti-deportation team or our advocacy team, advocating for people's pardons and also advocating for their freedom to be reunited. The third one is actually in prison work, where we have newsletter that goes into prison, and then we do a lot of that that pre-release information gathering. We're one of the only orgs in the nation that has any kind of statistic of any API that is incarcerated
Wow.
through our newsletter.
So you feel like you're making a difference. You told me that the recidivism rate
Mhm.
is pretty low. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So we know is that like the first 90 day is the most crucial for somebody to reoffend.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have that support within the first 90 days, like the rate for them to go back is really high. And so we do intensive, one-on-one peer support, helping them deal with their emotions, their thought process, and because so much institutionalization is happening, trying to help them cope with that. Because out here is so different compared to prison. Where in prison, you got food, food, everything's roof, you got room and board, you got everything. But out here, you have to earn all that. And so, like, helping them to deal with that, like navigating how to use a phone. In there, we have collect phone. We just call and have our loved one accept a collect call. Out here, like, you got to learn all this stuff. You got to learn how to use the internet. You got to learn how not to get scammed. Like, I got scammed so many times and lost hundreds and thousands of dollars because I got scammed.
Wow.
And so like, imagine somebody that don't have nothing and get scammed. They'd be in debt, right? Their credit score would be horrible because one thing I realized, your credit is your identity out here in the society.
Absolutely. Yeah. From a personal standpoint, Keith, what makes the work fulfilling for you? I know you're helping other men and women who've been in similar situations, but what does that give to you?
For me, that's my way of making amends for what I've done, the harm that I caused my community. So I don't look at this as it is exhausting work to give your all to somebody that's going through the same. Because I understand, I've been in their shoes, so much empathy for that person that's coming home, but also so much compassion, not just for them, but also helping the community heal in this process. For having us share, like, the folks that's coming home. Part of our thing pre-COVID is to call community emergent events, where we help our formerly incarcerated engage in community events and to break the stereotype and the label of what a formerly incarcerated person looked like.
Yeah.
And so even now, like, having them share their story, by and teach them how to share the story is very crucial for me, right? Because we want them to be accountable for what they've done, but also show that they're not the same person
I think
that went in all those
you
years.
used the word healing in a conversation we had.
Yes.
Do you feel that
Yeah.
you are doing the healing work for yourself, your community, and the families? So many families affected by this.
Yeah, there's thousands. So I'm just a voice of thousands of other that are going through this situation in California. That's not including the nation.
Mhm.
The numbers are hundreds of thousands that's affected in the nation, if not millions. Because in America, there's like 5 billion. There's 5 billion people. So like, imagine there's millions of others that are going through the same thing like I have, right? But that are not talking about this.
Well, I think
There's no awareness about
not
this. There's
5
no
billion.
resources for them.
We're not at 5 billion
Oh yeah,
quite yet, but
five. Well,
there's a lot of people out
oh,
there
I'm
who are
sorry. Yeah,
affected. Yeah.
that is a lot of
Yeah.
people, right?
And you've
5 million probably.
and
Yeah,
you've seen a change in your own family, in the way your own family looks
I
at
do.
you. Is that right?
Yeah, so they accept the change. So there's still a lot of stigma in my own family about being formerly incarcerated. Like, like they're not open. They still, because there's generations of cultural upbringing that they went through, where it's like, for me, even after 6 years being home, I still haven't broke that wall. I'm put a dent in it, but I still haven't broke that wall. Because that's generations of trying to break it in less than 6 years. Like, that's, some, yes, it's a miracle if it happens, but like mine, we're still a struggle trying to educate them about my work and trying to bring them out to see what I do.
Well, it's really great to hear about the work that the committee is doing. And I think a lot of people would like to learn more about how maybe they can contribute financially to the success of the organization. How do people learn more about your
Yeah.
group?
So you can find us on Facebook at Asian Prisoner Support. You can also find us on Twitter at Asian Prisoner SC. You can also see us on Twitter at Asian Prisoner SC, and follow us on social media. And right now we're doing a campaign for our reentry team. So the four of us that's on the reentry team are facing immediate deportation right now. And you can find it, you can find that at, there's four of us. So yeah, there's me, there's Maria, there's Bun, and there's PJ.
But you're safe,
So
right?
I'm not safe per se. Like, they could change, like Vietnam and America could change an MOU and I could be picked up at any moment.
Wow. Okay. That's
So
kind
every
of
day is we're all living in limbo.
wow, that is a chilling reality. But that's, as you said, the reality
is.
for many, many people in this country right now. I want to thank
Yes.
you, Nip Ki Lam, who is with the Asian Prisoner Support Committee, for sharing your story, speaking so candidly and honestly about what you've been through. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your thoughts. As you heard from
Thank you,
Ki,
Sasha.
there is a website, and we'd like to hear from you, our listeners, about suggestions for future guests or topics. And also, we would like you to check in with Asian Pacific Voices through our podcast platform and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Asian Pacific Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, a nonprofit that empowers our Asian and Pacific Islander communities with a voice through the media arts. If you would like to support our program, please visit AsianPacificVoicesRadio.com. I am your host, Sasha Fu. Thank you so much for listening. Please join us again next week for another exciting and thought-provoking episode of Asian Pacific Voices Radio. Until then, take care.